4 in favor of Ephraim. The court held that the U.S. government had no right to rob Ephraim of his American citizenship. The court, reversing its previous judgment as regards the Mexican-American, ruled that Ephraim had not shown intent to lose his citizenship by voting in Israeli elections. While Washington claims it has a good neighbor policy with Mexico, the U.S. does not permit Mexicans to hold dual nationality. The U.S. makes them become either U.S. or Mexican. You can't be both. But the U.S., in its special relationship with Israel, has become very sympathetic to allowing Israeli Americans to retain two nationalities and allowing U.S. citizens not only to hold public office in Israel, but to hold U.S. government positions as well. No other country holds this special exception to our laws of citizenship. So, you may ask, are there any other dual Israel-American citizens who hold U.S. government positions that could compromise American security? The answer is yes. Consider the following list. Michael Mukasey, recently appointed as U.S. Attorney General. Mukasey also was the judge in the litigation between developer Larry Silverstein and several insurance companies arising from the destruction of the World Trade Center on 9/11/2001. Michael Chertoff, former Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division at the Justice Department, now head of Homeland Security. Richard Perle, one of Bush's foreign policy advisors. He is the chairman of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board. A very likely Israeli government agent, Perle was expelled from Senator Henry Jackson's office in the 1970s after the National Security Agency, or NSA, caught him passing highly classified national security documents to the Israeli embassy. He later worked for the Israeli weapons firm Soltam. Perle came from a pro-Israel think tank, the AEI. Perle is one of the leading pro-Israeli fanatics leading this Iraq warmongering within the administration and now in the media. Paul Wolfowitz, former Deputy Defense Secretary and member of Perle's Defense Policy Board in the Pentagon. Wolfowitz is a close associate of Perle and reportedly has close ties to the Israeli military. His sister lives in Israel. Wolfowitz came from the Jewish think tank Gensa. Wolfowitz was the number 2 leader within the administration behind this Iraq warmongering. He later was appointed head of the World Bank, but resigned under pressure from World Bank members over a scandal involving his misuse of power. Lawrence or Larry Franklin, the former Defense Intelligence Agency analyst with expertise in Iranian policy issues, who worked in the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Douglas Feith and reported directly to Feith's deputy William Luty, was sentenced 20th January 2006 to, quote, more than 12 years in prison for giving classified information to an Israeli diplomat, unquote. And members of the pro-Israel lobbying group American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC. Franklin will, quote, remain free while the government continues with the wider case, unquote, and his, quote, prison time could be sharply reduced in return for his help in prosecuting, unquote, former AIPAC members Stephen J. Rosen and Keith Wiseman. As an update to this, the trial with these AIPAC spies has been postponed indefinitely. How could the trial be postponed indefinitely? Kevin DeGregory was the head prosecuting attorney, but weeks prior to the trial, he had retired from his position as prosecutor to go work for a Jewish law firm. Douglas Feith, Undersecretary of Defense and Policy Advisor at the Pentagon. He is a close associate of Perle and served as his special counsel. Like Perle and the others, Feith is a pro-Israel extremist who has advocated anti-Arab policies in the past. He is closely associated with the extremist group the Zionist Organization of America, which even attacks Jews that don't agree with its extremist views. Feith frequently speaks at ZOA conferences. Feith runs a small law firm, Feith & Zell, which only has one international office in Israel. The majority of their legal work is representing Israeli interests. His firm's own website stated prior to his appointment that Feith, quote, represents Israeli armaments manufacturer, unquote. Feith basically represents the Israeli war machine. Feith also came from the Jewish think tank Gensa. Fife, like Pearl and Wolfowitz, are campaigning hard for the continuation of the Israeli proxy wars against Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. Fife was investigated by the FBI under suspicion of leaking classified information to Israel, being that he was Larry Franklin's boss when Franklin leaked those documents to Rosen and Wiseman of AIPAC. For that, he was forced to leave the National Security Council. Fife was also investigated by the Senate Intelligence Committee for sexing up intelligence that was used to justify invading Iraq. Edward Lutwyck, member of the National Security Study Group of the Department of Defense at the Pentagon, Lutwyck is reportedly an Israeli citizen and has taught in Israel. He frequently writes for Israeli and pro-Israeli newspapers and journals. Lutwyck is an Israeli extremist whose main theme in many of his articles is the necessity of the U.S. waging war against Iraq and Iran. Henry Kissinger. One of the many Pentagon advisors, Kissinger sits on the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board under Pearl. For detailed information about Kissinger's evil past, read Seymour Hersh's book, Price of Power, Kissinger in the Nixon White House. Kissinger likely had a part in the Watergate crimes, Southeast Asia mass murders, which is Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, installing Chilean mass murdering dictator Pinochet, Operation Condor's mass killings in South America, and more recently served as Serbia's ex-dictator Slobodan Milosevic's advisor. He consistently advocated going to war against Iraq. Kissinger is the Ariel Sharon of the U.S. Unfortunately, President Bush nominated Kissinger as chairman of the September 11th Investigating Commission. It's like picking a bank robber to investigate a fraud scandal. He later declined this job under enormous protests. Dov Zakheim. Dov Zakheim is an ordained rabbi and reportedly holds Israeli citizenship. Zakheim attended Jews College in London and became an ordained Orthodox Jewish rabbi in 1973. He was adjunct professor at New York's Jewish Yeshiva University. Zakheim is close to the Israeli lobby. Dov Zakheim is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, or CFR, and in 2000 a co-author of the project for the New American Century's position paper titled Rebuilding America's Defenses, advocating the necessity for a Pearl Harbor-like incident to mobilize the country into war with Israel's enemies, mostly Middle Eastern Muslim nations. He was appointed by Bush as Pentagon Comptroller from 4th May 2001 to 10th March 2004. At that time, he was unable to explain the disappearance of $1 trillion. Actually, nearly 3 years earlier, Donald Rumsfeld announced on 10th September 2001 that an audit discovered $2.3 trillion was also missing from the Pentagon books. That story, as mentioned, was buried under 9/11's rubble. The two sums disappeared under Zakheim's watch. Despite these suspicions, on 6th May 2004, Zakheim took a lucrative position at Bose Allen Hamilton, one of the most prestigious strategy consulting firms in the world. One of its clients then was Blessed Relief, a charity said to be a front for Osama bin Laden. Bose Allen and Hamilton then also worked closely with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which is the research arm of the Department of Defense. Intelligence concerning Dov tells us that he is a dual Israeli-American citizen and has been tracking the halls of the U.S. government for 25 years, casting defense policy and influence on Presidents Reagan, Clinton, Bush Sr., and Bush Jr. Further intelligence points out that most of Israel's armaments were gotten thanks to him. Squads of U.S. F-16s and F-15s were classified as military surplus and sold to Israel at a fraction of their value. Kenneth Edelman. One of the many Pentagon advisors, Edelman also sits on the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board under Pearl and is another extremist pro-Israel advisor who supported going to war against Iraq. Edelman frequently is a guest on Fox News and often expresses extremist and often ridiculous anti-Arab and anti-Muslim views. Through his racism or ignorance, he actually called Arabs anti-Semitic on Fox News, dated 28 November 2001, when he could have looked it up in the dictionary to find out that Arabs, by definition, are Semitic people. They are Semites. Louis Scooter Libby, Vice President Dick Cheney's ex-chief of staff, as chief pro-Israel Jewish advisor to Cheney. It helps explain why Cheney is so gun-ho to invade Iran. Libby is longtime associate of Wolfowitz. Libby was also a lawyer for convicted felons